now take you to the broadcast of It's Time with Reverend Nathaniel W. Martin. Here's Reverend Martin.
Thank you, Dr. Blackwell, on this lovely day, which is raining here in Los Angeles and snowing in other places. But we thank God that we are here. And my name is Reverend Nathaniel W. Martin. I'm the pastor of the New Life Institutional Baptist Church here in the city of Los Angeles. And we are worshiping with our sister church, the Shiloh Missionary Christian Church, at our new location, 8916 South Main Street, here in the city of Los Angeles. That's 8916 South Main Street. And we welcome you and invite you to come and worship with us at any and all times, okay? That's 8916 South Main Street. And you know, they always say when the Baptists and the Charismatics get together, there's always going to be a shouting in the camp. And surely we have had a rich fellowship and a great communion in our fellowship and services. So we welcome you to come and share with us and be likewise blessed, all right? Okay, thank God for you. You are looking, the offering that you are looking at or viewing, we hope, is entitled It's Time. It is a social justice representation, in as much as we know that we cannot practice Christianity in a bubble, or we cannot practice Christianity in a vacuum. You're going to have to be out here with the real people. And some of us are nice and some of us ain't nice, but that's us. And so we have to find where we can work together and do God's will in spite of the stumbling blocks that may be placed in your way. You got to get in where you fit in, somebody has said. And surely that is what the child of God is attempting to do in this land in which we are living. Someone called us a settler colonialism project, and they're not far wrong. But yet we thank God that He has chosen Himself a remnant, even in this carnal and sensual nation of the United States of America. Proverbs 14:34 says that righteousness exalts a nation, but sin is a reproach to any people. And surely as we conclude our monthly February observance of Black History Month, we need to look at the Constitution, look at the Declaration of Independence, and see where we come short and see where we hit the mark. Because it's important for us going forward in this settler colonialism project that we don't come off as hypocrites to the rest of the world. One of our Vice President Kamala Harris said recently, 6 days ago, no nation is safe in a world where one country can violate the sovereignty and territorial integrity of another nation. And you know, the problem with that is that describes us, because we have violated the territorial integrity of many nations, Mexico being the least among them. And the reason why we have the problems here on the North American continent with people coming up from Central America and all of the nations down there is because we have meddled in their affairs. We have violated their sovereignty. And the British have a curious philosophy about sovereignty. The sovereignty only applies to European countries. The other countries are not granted such sovereignty because the British consider them uncivilized. And that hubris and that arrogance, not only with the British, but also with their American cousins, which is us, has helped us to get into a lot of trouble by trying to impress our civilizations and ways upon people that we need to at first learn what they are about and where we can help them, and rather than impose upon them our structures. The preamble to the Constitution says, "We, the people of the United States of America, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity, do ordain and establish this Constitution for the United States of America." That's a founding document. Of course, we have had very great problems with this document. Thurgood Marshall said on the bicentennial celebration that he considered the Constitution to be, that original Constitution to be a rather flawed Constitution, because it was found in the first three words of the Constitution, "We the people." Well, who were those people? And you heard me say before, at that time, Negroes were not included, the American Indian was not included, and not even white women or all white men were not included in this "We the people." It was really a document originally for the landed white people, and most of those signers of the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence were slaveholders. And so it was a different time. As Thurgood Marshall pointed out, he didn't consider the Constitution of that day to be a perfect document. And of course, if you look at history, you know that Barbara Jordan, who was on the Watergate Committee, acknowledged as much in her opening statements in the Watergate probe, and said that she was not included when that document was originally written. But thank God for the 13th, 14th, and the 15th Amendments, which came, mind you, following the Civil War. And those amendments to the original Constitution have allowed us to finally be included in the Constitution, not in the original, no, but in the subsequent. Because remember, the Constitution at that time, women could not vote, and at that time, no Negro could be even considered for public office as we are now. You know, we've had a black president, and we now have a black female vice president. And that was unthinkable when this Constitution was written. And so the Constitution has undergone many revisions. I say that because coming up to the Civil War, I'm going to read you in your hearing Alexander Stephens' statement. He said, "The Constitution, it is true, secured every essential guarantee to the institution." Now, the institution that he was talking about was the institution of slavery, while it should last, and hence no argument can be justly used against the constitutional guarantees that thus secured because of the common sentiment of the day. Now watch. These ideas, however, were fundamentally wrong. Now we need to talk about what ideas he was talking about. They rested upon the assumption of the equality of the races. Now remember, in nature and in biology, there is no race. This is a social construct. It is a human construct. There's no race in nature. But this racism we have had to battle with ever since. And it was evident in the original Constitution, And as Alexander Stevens said, the Constitution thus written was a blessing to the slaveholders, because it was, hence no argument can be justly used against the constitutional guarantees thus secured. Remember, the Constitution talked about a census of free persons, and it said excluding Indians, and it also said that those free persons were to include people held to labor for a certain time, and 3/5 of all other persons, and those all other persons that were 3/5 were, of course, the slaveocracy. Although they don't use the word slavery in the document. Of course, you don't have to put the word slavery in the document for the issue to be joined or to be recognized. Let me finish this up. Let me see. All right, I stopped off and said the assumption of the equality of the races was an error. It was a sandy foundation, and the idea of a government upon it, when the rains came and the winds blew, it fell. Still quoting Alexander Stevens. Our new government is founded upon exactly the opposite ideas. Its foundations are laid and its cornerstone rests upon the great truth that the Negro is not equal to the white race, that slavery, subordination to the superior race, is his natural and moral condition. This was Alexander Stevens, who was the vice president of the Confederacy, and as you know, we fought that war from 1861 to 1865, and that's how slavery was stamped out, because the captains and their cannons and the generals and their guns prevailed over the South. And so there is a conundrum, there's a dilemma, there's a paradox between the people who talk about the original Constitution and the people who talk about the subsequent Constitution as it applies today. Remember, the 13th Amendment, which abolished slavery, was not accepted by Kentucky until 1976. You can't make this stuff up, folks. Kentucky, Mitch McConnell's state, Rand Paul's state, they did not accept ratify the 13th Amendment until 1976. And when was the Civil War fought? 1865. When was the 13th Amendment passed? Passed in Congress was in 1865, before Abraham Lincoln was assassinated. And so you can see just from the preamble to the Constitution and what Alexander Stevens, who was a slaveholder, felt. They felt that the Constitution embraced them. It was good for them being the slaveholders and the slaveocracy. And they had no complaint with that Constitution until they decided to break away from the U.S. government on what they call secession. And of course, we know how that turned out. Abraham Lincoln said no, and Jefferson Davis said yes, and all of the firebrands on the Confederate side conspired. As you know, they fired on Fort Sumter down there in Charlotte, South Carolina, and the war was on. So we have to weigh those things, those actions, and even coming up into our present day. Like I said, righteousness exalteth a nation, but sin is a reproach to any people. And one thing we don't like to admit in the United States is that we have sin. And slavery was a sin. The genocide committed against the American Indians was a sin. The Jim Crow and the segregation that was practiced for over 100 years following 1863, was a sin. And the redlining and all of that was a sin. It was sinfulness. And these things still lurk in the background of our policies. When I say our, I'm talking about the United States policies going forward. And a lot of times we run upon the consequences of a policy that we have backed in the past. And like I said, I'm using we because I'm a part of the United States of America. I'm a citizen here. I'm not going nowhere. Everything that's old, I'm going to get it right here, including Revelation. But be that as it may, the reason why the African nations are not backing the United States totally, even though President Biden and even though Vice President Harris and to a larger or lesser extent Secretary of State Anthony Blinken and Secretary of Defense Mr. Austin, I can't think of his first name, are trying to woo or trying to coerce or cajole the African countries to get behind the United States. Remember, South African apartheid was supported by the United States of America. And when the divestiture movement began and when they started to boycott products from South Africa, it was Ronald Reagan and Dick Cheney, who was a secretary, I think he was the Secretary of Defense at that time, who was staunchly against any sanctions against South Africa. And the point is that it was Cuba and Russia that aided the South African, Nelson Mandela being a prime witness and example, who said that he was greatly indebted unto Cuba and Russia for their aid in helping them overthrow South African apartheid. And so South Africa is a great country, country now in South Africa, but they don't feel that beholden to the United States of America because America was for apartheid, and America supported apartheid, and America was invested in apartheid. And not only South Africa, but a lot of the other countries over there on the continent of Africa look askance at the United States because, after all, we were the ones that were upholding slavery, helping to go over there and trap their people and kidnap their people and bring them over here and work them like a slave until he died, and with no recourse and no reprimand and nobody no wiser. And so when these things are taken into account, you can understand why a lot of the countries in Africa are not getting on board with the support for Ukraine that the United States is attempting to coerce or cajole them into manifesting. All right? All right. Now, I think even Uganda, which is another country in Africa, a lot of those countries, like I said, look askance at the U.S. when they consider what the U.S. has done to their countries. When you talk about violate the sovereignty of a nation and the territorial integrity, well, we have done that wholesale. Not only here on this continent by invasions of Mexico, Grenada, Panama, the Suez Canal, all of those type of actions here on the North American hemisphere, but also over there on the continent of Africa. We even have right now what they call AFRICOM, which is a reinvasion of the sovereignty of those countries by the United States military in order to have bases and military installations on those countries' soil, and we look menacing to those people, and we have to accept that fact. Now remember, the Constitution was the positive law for the United States. But what they were, excuse me, when Alexander Stephen quotes that the Constitution recognized the equality of all races, and that was a mistake, he's not really quoting the Constitution, he's quoting the Declaration of Independence, which says, "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, and that they are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, that among these count them," say it with me, "life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, and that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed." Well, the African did not consent to be enslaved, and so he was not privileged to, he or she, to protest the fact that slavery was being imposed upon them, not just temporary slavery, but a perpetual slavery, chattel slavery. And so these things have to be taken into account when you start talking about the continent of Africa need to get behind Ukraine. There's a lot of reasons why they're not coming to getting behind Ukraine. Not the least of which is, of course, how the Ukrainians treated the Africans at the outbreak of the war. Remember, the Ukrainians would not allow the Africans to get on the trains or get on the buses to be evacuated back to their home countries until all of the Ukrainians that wanted to leave first were transported. And then after that, and what does that sound like? That sounds like apartheid. That sounds like segregation laws right here in America. And that was just last year when the war started. And so you have a lot of things that are not kosher. I put it that way. In October 23rd, 1947, W.E.B. Du Bois and the NAACP and Thurgood Marshall, they had a whole long list of personalities that went to the United Nations to plead the cause of the Negro to the United Nations General Assembly to accuse the United States of human rights violations, not against some other country, no, but against the Negro here in America. And of course that motion was defeated, or the document itself was blocked by no less a personality than Eleanor Roosevelt, who threatened to leave the NAACP, which she was a member, if they insisted on presenting this plea for the United Nations to investigate the United States as a country that violated human rights right here at home. And as I declared on, well, I reported, I touched on it last week. Remember in World War II, we had the double V for victory. Victory over the Nazism abroad, and then victory over the racism here at home, because I'm talking about black folks now, were in a double bind. We could not let the nations of the world overthrow, we could not let the Nazis and the fascists overthrow, overthrow our form of government. But at the same time, we recognized that what they were doing over there was the same thing that our nation was doing against us right here at home. And so it was a unique step on the part of W.E.B. Du Bois and the NAACP and all of the men and women who signed their names to that document in order to get this matter before the United Nations. Like I said, it was defeated because of the influence of Miss Eleanor Roosevelt, who was Franklin Delano Roosevelt's wife. And while she was a great help to us, don't get me wrong, a lot of times people that are helping you in one instance are not going to help you in another instance. Dr. Martin Luther King said that the white liberal was very helpful to us in desegregating the lunch counters because it didn't cost anything for the nation to desegregate its lunch counters. But to redress the poverty and well, he didn't use the word wealth disparity, but he just dealt with the poverty, was going to make the nation to do an investment in a radical revolution of values. That's the way he explained it. It's going to cost a radical revolution of values because it didn't make any difference if I could now go to the lunch counter if I didn't have no money to buy the cup of coffee or to buy the food and everything. As you recall, that was one of his reasons why he supported the trash sanitation workers in Memphis, because they were trying to say that we are men and we should be treated as men. We work in all of our lives and we can't provide for our families. And Dr. King made the observation that a man should not have to work all day and yet he cannot provide for his family. And so you can see how all of these policies, all of these practices tie in. Yes, racism yesterday, we say we passed that, but then we got the fallout, we got the consequences still being felt right now here at home. And don't forget, you had the redlining of the housing, so Negroes could not get housing, could not buy into the suburb. They had to be pitched in. Right here in Los Angeles, it was Nicholson Gardens and Jordan Downs and Hawaiian Gardens and Pueblo del Rio and all of those type of projects up and down the coast here. I'm just talking about Los Angeles, but it was up and down the coast. And in Chicago or New York, they had ghettos. They put us in the ghettos and the Cabrini Greens and all of those places that we were forced to live in. And so now we are still hampered and crippled by those former policies. Yeah, you can go, now you can go into another neighborhood, but you ain't got the money to go. You can't buy in Beverly Hills or Bel Air because you can't afford to be up there. So the racism, though subtle, is still continuing. And I just thought I would make those remarks and put those emphases and points out there that we look hypocritical when we tell the United Nations of the world that no nation is safe in a world where one country can violate the sovereignty and territorial integrity of another. And like we said, we talk about Mexico, we talk about Haiti, Santo Domingo, and all of those places. Too numerous to name. The names don't come that quickly to my mind, and my time is up. But where have we not invaded other people's sovereignty and integrity? And though we went into Iraq, we went into Afghanistan, we went into a lot of places where we had no business, but we violated their sovereignty. So we look like hypocrites. All right, so now as I close, remember, if you're working on a job and they don't want to pay you, take a lesson from the slave. If hard work had paid off, every slave coming out of slavery would at least been $2 million millionaire. But they worked them to death, and they died, and they were poor when they started working, they were poor when they stopped working. So if you're working on a job and they don't want to pay you, take my advice, please, and don't work for them. All right? Thank you, Doc. We out of here. Love you. See you next week.